Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mount podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. In this episode, I'm joined by the amazing Diana Lang. She's a meditation teacher, a board member here at Meditation Mount, and we've done some podcasts in the past, and it's exciting anytime I get a chance to talk to her. So in this episode, the subject was, how can I help? And the question of help brings up some of the most complex territory we navigate in our relationships and in our community and even in the esoteric traditions. We sometimes ask, why does perfectly good advice get rejected? And we wonder, when does genuine assistance become interference? This conversation examines the counterintuitive metaphysical principle, don't help unless you're asked, and what that actually means in practice. We tackle the difference between personality-driven helping that often serves the helper's ego more than the recipient's needs, and soul-directed service guided by the question, what would love do? This discussion covers everything from recovery to addiction to examining how simple conscious witnessing can sometimes be more powerful than jumping into action. And we even try to help with how you can recognize when the desire to help might actually be creating more problems than it solves. And we really hope you enjoy the episode. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation, it helps us to bring you this podcast as well as all the other programs the Mount produces both today and in the future. We are incredibly grateful and honored by your support. All right, back to the podcast. And how can I help? When we approach a subject like help, it brings up a lot of different questions, and some of them are semantic, and some of them are where we strive to have a definition. For me, when I always think about help too, I always think about it from the perspective of recovery. And I know from when I first got clean, there was a lot of people that wanted to reach out and help me, but the way that they wanted to help wasn't actually helpful. And it caused a real rift in our relationships, some of them fracturing some of the relationships that still haven't been healed to this day. So it got me thinking about the very nature of help. What does it mean? What is our obligations? In the various traditions, some traditions in some religions have specific sort of practices or mitzvah or anything, your by your faith demands that you help. And then I was also thinking too, well, what about the atheists and where do they derive help from? Or is it purely utilitarian? And then I was even thinking down to when I walk my dogs, we do what is called the Friday night walk, where it's like a 3.5 mile walk, and one of them is down the avenue in here in Ventura, and it's so that I can kind of get our dog Sunny, who's very reactive, get her trained to the sounds of the streets and people, and But I always see businesses that have this sign in the front, and it says it's okay to say no to panhandlers. And I saw, and I think about that. I'm like, is it though, what? And of course, the line under it is always, please give to a charity. And then it's like, okay, but you know what? I know how charities work. And I know that sometimes, 10 cents of that every dollar actually goes, if it goes at all, to whatever their cause is, So that brings me, sort of come full circle about, what does it mean to help? What is help? And how can I help?
Well, it's so great. It's so important right now, right?
Yeah.
This is where we are, as we feel so helpless to help because so many things are out of our hands.
Mm-hmm.
But some things land right in our lap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we can affect maybe, or be party to, or help or in some way possibly. There's a quote that says the 4 most important words you can ever say are, how can I help? Right. And it's a good question because most often I'll just use a mundane subject, and somebody's telling you their problems and they're saying, oh, and my dog died and my husband left me and my house burned down. And it sounds like there's a question in there, but there's not. And metaphysically, we have a rule that says you don't help unless you're asked. And so sometimes a conversation like that, when somebody's really venting and letting it all flow, or you're watching the news and it's all flowing and it sounds like help, but
Yeah.
it's not a help. And the problem is, and it's kind of what you were saying about recovery, people are trying to help you like maybe they would want, or be in some position of superiority or something, or ego possibly even, when maybe the best thing for that person is to hit bottom, as they say, right? Or let them have the experience so that they actually want the answer. So what happens is if we give the answer before it's asked, it is often rejected and not heard. And not only that, it can be not heard by any source. So it's very dangerous actually to offer into something that's not asking. And so how can we help becomes a very complex, subtle energy following. And, what I do with people and friends and even my clients that I work with, I do my counseling or my meditation classes, is I say, are you asking me?
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
sure sounds like they are. They're saying this happened and this happened and then I did that and they said that. And it sounds like an ask, but it's just a vent. And that person might need very much to do that so they can hear themselves, right? And it's always easy to solve somebody else's problem, right? Because we're outside of it. So it's so easy to say, well, just stop drinking then, or stop taking the heroin. It gets very black and
Yeah.
white and simplistic, where the person is having a holy experience, literally
Yeah.
a sacred walk, even if it has to do with using or some negative thing that we would say, oh, that's a negative experience, but maybe they need that negative experience as a soul. You see, so
Wow.
it's a big judgment to start helping when we're not being asked to help.
Yeah, that's amazing. The whole function of time within that is an interesting mix into that equation, because that is something you can't help a person before their time, and the fact that the intentionality of asking for that help is so huge. Um, that was actually two things that really factored in for me, is that people, they wanted to help in the way that they thought was helpful, but also in a time, like that, they wanted a timeline that they thought was appropriate, and and for me, and I think they also wanted, they think about metrics when we think about help, like, so, like, I'm going to help you, but I need to see you hit this metric, and like, and I often say about my story is that, I'm not the poster child for anything, because, like, I'm more often than not, I'm the exception that proves the rule. So, like, one of the things they tell you when you get clean is not to isolate. But that's what I did. I isolated. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't go to meetings. I white knuckled it on my own, and that's how I got clean. That worked for me. That's not a high percentage success rate.
Right.
So the way that I was going about things was not in people's eyes, was not a high percentage success rate. So when you see that happening, to kind of bring this around, what I was getting at is, so, like, Jesus is carrying this cross on the way to his fate is sealed, but someone yet helps him carry it. So even if something is doomed, what is our role to help or to ease pain? Like, whenever we have that possibility. Yeah.
Okay, so well, that's another way of looking at it. Um, so I was going to say, at first, I was going to answer about conditional love versus
Mhm.
unconditional love.
Yeah.
But then you have to define what is love.
Mhm.
You see, and that's a big question. And I always say when I use the word love, it's capital L. It's not love like romantic love or my
Mhm.
child or my mother or those kinds of love, but it's
Mhm.
like universal love is how I would call that. And so, one of the questions I say as a practice for people is, what would love do?
Mhm.
So, does love give money to the heroin addict, or does love not give money? Well, it depends is the answer, just like you just said. Does
Yeah.
the addict go off on their own, or does the addict go into the group? And it would depend, of course, because everyone is on their own unique journey. And every part of that journey is sacred. Every
Mhm.
part of it, the fall and the rise. and the fall again, right? And the rise again. It's all part of the uniqueness of that soul. And so judgment says there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and we're going to pray the gay out of this person and all that sort of thing, where we have this sort of moralistic, this is the only and correct way, which is just someone's interpretation. And so, sort of the answer to what I think what you were asking is to help as you're able and to sort of help with what's in front of you. You know what I mean? So if you're
Yeah.
happening to be there as Jesus is carrying the cross and you could help, you would, because he's right there.
Yeah.
But and this is sort of like what's happening in the Ukraine or any place that we can think of, Gaza or all the hot spots around the world, we're not there. But if we were there, we could have an effect potentially of helping. But it's in a way, and from a spiritual perspective, it goes back to very simple. What's in front of me right now? It might be the highest thing I can do is to get my own house in order rather than try to get your house in order, right?
Yeah, that's
and
a
so
great
if
one.
my house is out of order, or I'm in distress, or I'm in depression, or I am in reaction, well, there's my mess to work with. That's the first step for me. And then from that place of healed or healing, I can maybe bring that to something else. So, we want to save the whales and we want to, all the things that we want to do, but I'm not directly connected to the whales necessarily. I can give money, I can do something, right? But I can't necessarily directly solve that. But if I was a research scientist that worked with, aquamarine biology, then maybe I would have a way to affect that directly. So I think what I'm answering is deal with what's in front of you. It goes back to chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
What's here right now? Do that.
Yeah, that's really important, and it sort of touches on some of the questions I kind of I made a bunch of questions and kind of topics to think about, but I think about this through my own perspective. So I'm not talking from a completely just sort of abstract way, because some of the things I think about too is like when we help someone, are we creating a dependency? Are we interfering with their karmic lessons? Because I think about times when, like, man, did I need some help? But if I had gotten that help at that time, what would I have done? So I think about this like in the sort of the last couple months of the time that I was homeless and living, like someone sent me like a bunch of money for at the time, and of course I immediately just bought drugs with it, but then like I've told this story before, but like, the moment I said to the universe, if there's another way, I'm willing to try it. I don't know if you know this story, but within 24 hours, okay. So I'll recap the story. So I was living in Vegas, on the street, living behind a dumpster on Tropicana. And it was in February where, at night, sometimes it can get down to freezing. And during the day, sometimes it can get up to like 80. And it just really wears you down. And I was coming around, about a 10-year bender, basically, and I was at that point where it wasn't a rock bottom, right? Because as my brother likes to say, we have that cockroach gene, like you just can't kill us. But I recognized that I was at a crossroads where there was a place where like if I kept going, I couldn't come back to at least here. I knew that I would, because for where I was going, like I was still kind of had my foot in the world a little bit, but all my friends and the other street people that I knew, they were living in the tunnels, they were living in old train cars, and like they were fully immersed, no going back. They're still out there today, or they've died, And I was at this crossroads, and I literally said, I spoke out, I said to the universe, if there's another way, I'm willing to try. And within 24 hours, without having known any of that, a friend of mine in Israel had found out from someone else that I was homeless, called the only person that she knew in Israel, in Vegas, got her to get her boyfriend to go get in his truck and drive around and find me and put me in a hotel within 24 hours of me saying that. And so, and then that was it. I white knuckled it and I got clean. And that was 7.5 years ago. So,
yeah. That's a miracle.
Yeah, but it's also interesting at the time.
And timing.
Timing, and timing and intentionality. and in that sense, so that was help that could help, but up until that point, like until that I was ready to accept or make a change, it wasn't, there was nothing I do. But at the same time, there was this homeless guy that lives by me, and for about 2 years, Kelly and I, we helped him, brought him food, gave him money, charged his cell phone, and with the idea that hopefully that he would get into some housing, and he finally did, and that lasted about 8 months. And then he called back again, he's like, I'm back in my spot, and I was like, I can't keep doing this, and I told him, I said, I'm happy to help you get to another housing place. I'm happy to drive you, but I can't come every other day like I was doing that before, I was, and that was really hard for me, because I'd been on both sides of that argument, and um, so I struggle with that, as someone that has been helped. Where do I help? And I guess I go back to that, I've used this so many times on this podcast, but if you're on a plane and the oxygen mask drop down, they say you have to put yours on first because you can't help other people if you pass out, So we're in the world and we're trying to help other people, but when does that interfere with someone's sort of karmic lessons, and is there kind of a hierarchy or help of the way that I would help maybe an adult is different than maybe the way I would help a teenager who I know has to make some mistakes on their own. They're not going to listen anyway. They're a teenager, but
Adults are the same.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So
Teenagers are actually more malleable, I feel.
That's true. That's true. Well, I have to remember that my perspective is different because I had my own ideas,
I love teenagers.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, because they're super idealistic.
Yeah.
They're seeking, all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I did. So how does how does someone's karma, or what's our responsibility to let people have their own sort of adventure?
Right. Well, that's the whole thing, isn't it? So we want to, as a society, create safe space for everyone so that everyone has enough and everyone has food, and which is a wonderful ideal, right? A wonderful ideal. But as a lot of people discover with homeless people, for instance, they don't want to live in a home. They are electively choosing to be independent and free and would rather live behind the dumpster than live in a house until maybe they change their mind, right?
Yeah.
And so when you try to take somebody and you put them into a situation, you're overriding them and their karma and their experience that they must experience. And they'll just go back anyway, as you explained. You gave several examples of just exactly that happening until the timing and, like you said, the intentionality. And the question is actually there. And that day when you prayed or you asked or you begged or you realized, you called out for help, you got help in 24 hours. And it becomes miraculous because guess why? Miracle equals no resistance. So when there's resistance, that creates the experience of time and suffering. And when there's no resistance, you can have a miracle like that. But we're in resistance pretty much all the time until we're not. And so that's why in spirituality, we talk about the concept of surrender. That an honest surrender, not like I give up, it's a show of I want it to be better, the sort of drama of that, but the actual falling to your knees, right? And when we say, I don't know, then an answer can come that isn't part of the ego's creation. And one of my wonderful definitions of the ego is a closed and fixed system. Right?
Yeah.
And so unless the ego is open, there's no way that anything new can come to it because the ego will keep coming to the same conclusion. It can ask the question 1,000 different ways and it'll still keep coming to the same conclusion because the ego is a closed and fixed system. So you have to fall to your knees. You have to surrender. And that's a big tenet in spirituality, is surrendering, which Western brains hate because we're no pain, no gain. We never give up. Fight till I die. We are taught this sort of winning and beating the odds and crushing the enemy and all that sort of
Yeah.
thinking is in our society. And in Eastern teachings, it's the opposite. You go with the flow. You are moving with soul, not against soul. And if I hurt you, I hurt me.
Mm. Yeah, that brings it back to this idea too. Depending on how you approach the world, if you really, this is the kind of subject that really tests a person who's non-dualistic. Like, are you really willing to put your money where your mouth is? That we're all one. It's
Yeah,
like
we are.
is like what, like how do you treat the one that is like diametrically opposed to if we're all one?
Right.
It's
Because
obviously.
that's exactly what we're experiencing in the polarity of the moment is there
Hmm.
seems to be this side and that side thing, when
Yeah.
really it's just an extension of the group soul.
Hmm.
It is, and it's acting out very poignantly at the moment because of the astrology, because of the
Hmm.
energy, because of the karma of the Civil War and the American Revolution. It's all playing out in front of us because it's unhealed and it needs
Right.
to come up for healing. And that's what a healing crisis is.
So how do we start to do that on, I mean, on an individual basis? I mean, I guess I also wanted to take a second to let that land because that was it was pretty intense, and I completely agree with you. And then of course my next thought is like, well, what the heck can I do? And I
Right.
guess but I guess the first thing is asking that question is important, because if you're not even asking that question, well, you're probably not going to be doing anything. But once we get
Because
around to,
more the
yeah.
question is, how can I be right?
Oh, yeah.
And they be wrong.
Yeah.
And then we're back
Right.
in the polarity again, right?
Yeah.
How can I help might mean doing nothing and letting
Yeah.
something play out. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not. And that goes back to doing what's in front of you again. Where
Mhm.
can I help is where I'm standing,
Mhm.
in my platform of, if I'm a famous person, then maybe I'm affecting a lot of people just by osmosis. And if my import or impact is in my family or in my neighborhood or with one other person, that
Mhm.
counts. It all
Yeah.
counts.
Yeah.
But if it's not being asked, it's falling on deaf ears, quite literally, and creating more resistance, which means less miracle, right?
Mhm.
So miracle is when there's sort of an epiphany, right? In terms of like the world situation right now. Wouldn't
Mhm.
it be amazing? And I think that is what's going to happen eventually is we are going to have a group epiphany. But I think it's going to have to get pretty bad first, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
we keep explaining it away from the polarized sides that we stand on. I'm right, you're wrong, both ways.
Mhm.
We never get to the triangle, which is to get to higher ground. We've got to get to higher ground.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting to think about it that way. Which brought up, like, yeah, from that perspective, there's this concept of like spiritual bypassing through service. So like I'm going to be the great helper, and when like I see this all the time, like you're walking around as like a glaring, flashing red flag of all these things that you're not working on yourself. So I think sometimes I think we can get wrapped up in that, especially with the immediacy of life that's all around us now. Events that take place all around the world are in your hand, and you're staring at them, and like they're now in your living room in a way that even TV didn't really express. And like, so because along with it comes everyone's comments, everyone's takes, everyone's, and each of those, even though it's energy and it's intention, and it's all part of the same soup that we're in.
Right.
And so
But what you said though, that spiritual bypassing is a
Mhm.
big word right now, a
Yeah,
phrase right now
it is going
in
around,
the
and that's
spiritual world, and it becomes this sort of catch-all for avoidance and denial, and which is
yeah,
good. It should be
yeah,
questioned like that.
yeah.
But the thing what's so great about being present,
Mhm.
which is the spiritual kind of number one, step one of spirituality is be present, right?
Yeah.
Know thyself, is to stand in the present moment as it is. And
Mm.
from that's not spiritual bypassing. That is exactly what spiritual bypassing is not. Because
Mhm.
spiritual bypassing is I'm not in the moment. I'm in some idealism in my mind or a story I'm telling about, what the world is or what I think the world is or how I
Mhm.
think the world should be. Those are all things of the imagination, not the reality. And
Yeah.
remember, if at least this is my perspective, is that magic or manifestation, magical manifestation
Mm.
comes out of the reality. not out of the imagination. The reality is what causes the magic, and that's why magical thinking doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. I have a lot to say about that, but we can maybe we'll do another episode on manifesting and manifesting versus magical thinking, because that's something we could
big
spend some time.
subject.
Yeah, big subject. Yeah, but bringing it back to help, I think it's so interesting how, like when you look at the things that someone does and you immediately start judging, it brings in a lot of judgment. So
So number 2 in the
yeah,
spiritual tenets, the second commandment is don't judge.
right? Because I was just thinking, so if I even though I live in an apartment complex, I take care of the little garden in front of my building, and my neighbor, we share a hallway, our front door is right next to each other, and then there's a hallway for. She likes to sweep and mop that area probably once a week, and so I water her plants and always, and yeah, I guess I could be using that time doing something else, or and we start judging how we're using our time, but what is the benefit to keeping your side of the street clean? And then you start to think about, oh, well, it does affect, that has a multiplier effect that starts right here at home. And I think in some ways we've forgotten what it's like to be in a community, even if it's just your neighbor. Because we're now connected.
That goes back to we're all connected, right?
Yeah.
That if I keep the garden watered, even though you're not watering it, but you're doing something else, or you're not, I can still water the garden because I want our garden to be beautiful, or to grow fruit, or whatever I'm growing. That is just the right thing to do, and that's not even necessarily helping. That's more just like social cooperation, whether somebody's doing their fair share or not, because how many times in life we're not able to do our fair share, or whatever that even means, right?
Yeah.
We do the right thing because it's the right thing.
Yeah, and
you don't let the garden die. You don't let the garden die if you have any power over that particular situation.
Yeah, that's an important. Don't let the garden die is a good sort of summation of that. When it kind of goes back to the serenity prayer too. Knowing what you can change and what you can't. But I wanted to maybe go back to something they kind of said earlier. It kind of is like the witnessing versus fixing. How do we even areas that we have power over? When is it time to witness, and when is it time to actually be in action? How do you really determine that? Is it dependent on someone literally asking, or or when do you move from being a witness to being in action?
Yeah, I think it really big depends. It depends kinds of an answer. When you're dealing with friends and family, I think there's an ask there. I think there's an ask in nature as well, though. If the garden is dying, you water it, right? That can't ask you to water it, but you just want to water it because it gives you joy, right? To make it flourish versus die. And there's a lot of, if you look around as you walk down your own street in your own neighborhood, there's people that take care of it, and there's people that dump trash right next door to the garden, right? So everything is happening. So you have to sort of get to a place where you're listening to what the call is in the moment. It goes back to being present, like what's in front of me right now. That's something I can possibly address or say something to. If somebody's arguing, and this has happened to me so many times, where there's a big fight going on, right? And you can break it up, which might be the exact right thing to do if you're a big man. You might be able to break up the fight, or two dogs fighting and you're big enough to separate the two dogs. That's a call to action by the situation. But sometimes, you let them fight it out, or sometimes you're not able to, you would become more drama by your interference or interaction with it than if you just let it play out, right? And so it goes back to it depends, which is not a black and white answer, which people don't like, because we want to have what's always the right answer. And there isn't always a right answer, because it goes back to what would love do? What would love do?
That's exactly right. And while you were saying that, I had this idea. So if we look at this kind of from from the Alice Bailey Agni Yoga Trans Himalayan, so traditions, like the sort of esoteric foundations of help. And we're kind of, I think we're witnessing of like this sort of shift between like personality driven help and soul directed service. So if we're looking at it from those perspectives, like what is it like? What does that mean to even be soul directed in your service, or soul directed in your help? And like what's
versus ego directed.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one way to start to break that down, because
right.
most of us, and how we're trained to be, is to be in our ego, to be the best, to win the award, to get the degree, to succeed, to win. Soul isn't about that at all. You already won. There's nothing to win. There's nothing to gain. There's nothing to do. There's no degree you're supposed to get. There's nothing that you're meant, that you have to have in order to succeed. You're already divine. You're already divine. And as you know that, and when you see people that are sort of innately knowing that, I somehow thinking of John Lennon, I don't know why him specifically, but I could probably think of a lot of examples of people like that. They just come and are expressing soul somehow without so much, and they have an ego, because we all have an ego, but there's something bigger coming through, and there's not as much interference, so that thing can come through. The more we become ego identified, kind of the more lost we are in a way, because we're all chasing the next new car or the next, achievement. And sometimes the lifetime is about, being the gardener, or, and having 7 children, and, and it's just different. Everybody's experience is different. So it's our judgment that's saying that's a good experience and a valid one, and that is not a good experience and not a valid one. And they are all God, all. From anything you can imagine, from the worst of us to the best of us, whatever even that means. Yeah. And it's so it's like an honoring of spirit, an honoring of someone's journey, from a spiritual perspective. And so interference, and if it's not being asked, is interference, unless they're really actually asking. And so it's easier to say, and we're jumping from really, micro, macro here, but most people's lives, it's about their family and their friends. They're not necessarily thinking of it totally cosmically, like we're also talking about it cosmically. But to me, it's all the same answer. Is what would love do, capital L? What's the highest thing I can do? Not just what could I do that I can think of, because my own thinking will be limited and biased and judging, and not necessarily the highest thing at all. It'll just be my opinion of what I think you should do. Yeah. And that's what you have to laugh, right? Because it's not, it all gets very deadly serious, and it is very deadly serious, but it's also, if you look at the great teachers, they have humor, they have light. It is, as one of my teachers used to say, interesting life experience you're creating. He would say, and laugh.
That sounds like as someone's about to go off and do something incredibly stupid, that's what you say, like, interesting life experience you're about to create.
Right. And no judgment, though. Swear to God, no judgment.
A lot you'll learn from
just letting
this.
It happen. Like, it's okay, let's see that experiment and see where it goes. And maybe we can tell where it goes, but maybe we can't. Who are we to say, really? And our job is to manage ourselves.
Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I was also looking into, when it comes to like hierarchy of service, it seems like in the Alice Bailey teachings it goes like individual, group, planetary, and then solar. Like, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this stuff, but like, if you're just listening to this and you don't have a lot of experience with these teachings, like what does that even mean to be planetary or solarly, like to be in solar service, like, or to be like, how do you help on a solar level? Like, is it just something aspirational? Well, I
think that's something we wouldn't even be able to put words to, except that our soul is doing that. The soul is doing solar service.
Right.
And, so in planetary and personal service are a little different, because, we'll help our children, we'll help our families, we'll help the people we know. But when you think of planetary service, it's a bigger service, because it doesn't have a design in terms of I'm going to help this one. You're helping. You're watering the garden, right?
Mm.
It's thinking of it in a bigger context than just personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, that can be a lot to hold. But something you said earlier too is just, the how it is all the macrocosm and the microcosm. They're just this. They're really the same. The relationship that I have with my brother is really no different than the relationship that between two groups of people in the Middle East. It seems like the arguments and the disagreements and all these things can be boiled down to a lot of the same things. It's and when I think about this, I think like what's the best possible thing you could do to help in any situation is to look inward and start there. Start working on
Yeah.
something.
And
Um,
also to look at your own reaction, because
mhm.
when you see something happening in front of you, watching the news, let's say,
Yeah.
or with a friend, what's my reaction to that? Tells
Mhm.
me more about me than them,
Yeah.
right? And so the work keeps being about the self, to become more self-aware and to be more self-honest, right? And to take responsibility for the self. So if my house is messy, if my mind is messy, right?
Hmm.
I'm creating mess in my
Yeah.
world. And conversely, if I heal or I'm healing my world. It's all connected. So as
Yeah.
I heal myself, as we heal ourselves, we're healing our world.
Mm.
That's why Tonglen practice is so, so powerful, where you
Mm.
breathe in, right? They teach in the Tibetan teaching, they teach you to inhale the fear, right? Inhale cancer, inhale war, right? You have to inhale these awful subjects that every a molecule of your body wants to reject, right? Because it's
Mhm.
so abhorrent feeling. But you inhale it and then you exhale out the pattern of healing about that subject for every single person on the planet that might be experiencing that same pain,
Yeah.
right? Or that same fear. So that's planetary healing, right? That's Tonglen
Right.
practices planetary healing. You're doing something bigger than yourself without a self, though, because as soon as the self gets engaged, it becomes ego again. It becomes potentially, right? Because it's saying, you know, I think everyone should do this. And I think that everyone should do whatever they think, because our ways are different from each other. And the genius that is within you, that is within me, and was within anyone listening, right, is unique. And they
Mm.
need to do it their way. They really do. And so
Right.
you give permission, right, an allowance for truly unconditional love, which lets someone have that experience.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean we don't help at all, or we just stand there like, an apathy or something. It's the opposite of apathy. It's actually total engagement of
Mm.
being very present to what's happening in front of us. Because conscious witnessing, I call that, right? It's like like a sentry angel, you stand and you observe in full awareness. And sometimes just doing that, and I have 1,000 stories about this, but I'll just say the concept, which is when you stand in full presence, like a sentry angel, things fall apart. Things that aren't correct or for the highest good
Mm.
just kind of lose their steam, because some consciousness is observing without the judgment attached to it, in love, which not in a love that is, oh, are you okay, not that, but in that pure love that stands and sees. And what happens is the people that are fighting, the war that is occurring, could potentially kind of snap out of it,
Mm.
right? That's the
Yeah.
idea. And that's what meditation is. When we do world service meditation, which is critical to everything, is you're holding this back to the high point of the triangle. You're
Mm.
not on the polarity. You're not on the this side, that side. You're holding the highest point for everyone, so that we can get to a higher place, rather than just this side wins, this side wins, this side wins, this side wins, or loses, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
When you hold for the highest point, you're helping the whole world give a gap to something that allows for possible miracle, possible transformation, tr- um, and awareness. right?
Yeah.
That can happen in a blink of an eye, but somebody's got to hold that energy, and that's a huge discipline and a practice for meditators, right? When we do the world service, we pulse, 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 and we're not pulsing what I think, what I think, what I think. We're pulsing divine energy.
Yeah.
That we're just broadcasting in a sense.
That really, I really appreciate what you just said. That really kind of opened up and connected a lot of things for me. And that, I also see how that's maybe the underlying energetic structure between like a nonviolent protest or like an ongoing vigil. You know, it's like it's witnessing from from a place of of love and integrity. You know, and so as we do that, because I think we're about to go through some sort of choppy waters. So how do we stand in integrity and witness and sort of, God, it's almost like, yeah, it's just bringing that sort of quiet integrity to a situation changes the situation.
Yeah.
You
By
know,
seeing it,
yeah,
conscious observation is not passive.
right,
Right. And I think of that famous photograph, which I can't remember if it was Kent State or it was one of those in the 60s. It's a black and white, famous,
hmm
famous photo of this line of police officers with helmets on. And this guy is putting flowers in the
yeah,
rifle barrels,
yeah, that was Kent
you know?
State, yeah,
Yeah. And it's, radical. It's a radical thing to do. It's peace, right? He's
hmm
saying, come on, you guys, come on, remember
hmm
who you are, and
yeah,
he felt called to do that. That was an act of inspiration in that moment, and it's caught in an image, right, that is
hmm
known worldwide. Those kinds of things are inspired in the moment by your presence. So
yeah.
as we
So
stand in our presence, we can be inspired, and that what that answer is going to be different in every single time. So we shouldn't all be putting flowers in rifle barrels, because that might not at all be appropriate at another given time. But in that moment, it was
mhm,
perfect, right? And it
yeah.
becomes a symbol of peace.
When you are meditating specifically, also when we do sort of group creative meditation, when we do group world peace, in some ways, are you almost bringing a witness to the I'm just going to call it the Maya and sort of being like, come on now, come on, like when let's show your hand. Are we going to see behind the curtain? Like what's really going on? Like at some point, it's almost like it becomes so ludicrous that there's got to be you're almost questioning like what's happening here.
But it's all
Like,
needed. See, the
yeah, okay,
experience is just like you were saying about your own experience. It's
hmm
needed for your own progression. You wouldn't be where you are
right,
right now if that hadn't all happened to you. So there's
yeah,
not like, like this cosmic joke kind of thing. It's like cosmic perfection. And so the walk we walk, right, becomes,
hmm
my old experiences that I could tell stories about in my own life have brought me to where I am. It made me ask the questions that I
hmm
asked and answered and didn't answer, and I'm still
hmm
answering, right? Came out of my own progression. And so it's not like God's playing a joke on us
mm,
or,
yeah,
trying to trick us into getting things.
right, okay, yeah,
It's just the way it is, and it's sacred. That's what I really want to bring to this, is that even the pain is sacred. Even the
mm,
suffering is sacred. It's all sacred. And at some point we can know that when we look back and we get far enough away from it, right? You can,
hmm
we can, it's that comedians always say, too soon, is that too soon? They make that
right,
joke
yeah,
because
yeah,
it is too soon. And you make a joke about something that we're still in, it's too
hmm
soon.
yeah,
But when you get far enough away, you can see, oh, that happened for that. Right. And because of that, this happened. And you can see it from the big perspective, but in the perspective of standing inside of it, it's overwhelming and shocking, horrifying. You're right. And we don't know what to do. And then it goes back to how can I help?
yeah,
Right? Which goes back to staying present, right? Meditating, holding for the highest good, no matter what you see, no matter what you think, to
hmm
hold for the highest good anyway. And that is a piece of work. And it's constant. It's not just for 1 minute a day. It's just all day long in the background, like thrumming in the background, being present to
yeah,
whatever you see, to whatever's in front of us at any moment.
yeah, and That got me thinking while you were saying that, just sort of the interesting paradox of, you go through all these things in life and you develop all these tools and skills, and then like you bring them to bear in a situation, and sometimes now you realize, oh, my role here is just to witness, and like, it's like, because I definitely think about that a lot, because when one of the things they like to say to you early recovery is that your recovery will be a way people will learn, and it'll be their way through, and sometimes, like, especially for me, I'm like, the way that I do things is not necessarily, it's not scalable, so, and I had to learn these lessons in my own way, and they've shaped me very deeply, and I think that, yeah, just the restraint that goes in with help, because with help
Yeah, discipline. The
discipline,
discipline of not
yeah,
just jumping in
yeah,
before the timing is right.
hmm
And that is like listening to music, right? You have to sort of
hmm
feel when is the moment to step in or not step in.
yeah, because
Not doing something is as powerful as doing something seriously.
right,
And that's true. And not doing something can have more power sometimes than
hmm
the action of
right,
thinking this is the right answer. When just listening to someone and becoming still, like in a
hmm
conversation, and it gets very big
hmm
because you're not saying something right then,
yeah,
right? Because import, right? That person's hearing themselves, or something bigger is happening than the quick, sitcom kind of dialogue where it's going da 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 da. We're coming back and forth, and it's just ricocheting, but it's not going anywhere. It's not getting deeper. It's just
hmm
shallow, right?
yeah,
Or it could be.
yeah. Oh. I was thinking back to, I had this. I always get these like strange little snippets from. I had a high school English teacher, and you know how you were saying earlier about the capital L and lowercase l. He was always big on capital R romance or lowercase romance. He was a huge fan of the capital R romance. Like Gatsby and all this stuff, and I always think about that. Sometimes we get lost in the sort of there's the cosmic drama, and then there's the daily drama, and I always imagine those kind of like funny, like funny, like, but sort of over the top soap operas during the
Yeah.
day. Especially
Beverly Hills Housewives.
yeah, yeah. I especially like the ones that are on Telemundo, because like and like when there's, because there's so, it's almost like kabuki theater,
Yeah.
like how intense,
There's
and then,
stories.
but
Yeah.
there's stories. There are
There's
everyday
teaching
stories.
stories.
There's teaching stories, and then there's the cosmic drama, and then you realize, like, I used to love Greek mythology, growing up, and so, and the stories of the gods were just like, they were just like us, they were just so wrapped up in our own sort of weird lessons, but
Yeah,
we
taking things personally and
yeah,
off with their heads.
yeah,
And so the
yeah,
gods were a lot like
yeah,
us in those stories, right? And so we could
yeah,
relate to them in some ways. But there's higher answers, which is that capital L love again,
hmm
of like what would love do given any situation? And sometimes it takes action, and sometimes it does not.
yeah. And sometimes in the case of all that drama, sometimes um, you know, gosh, I just think about, like, not saying or doing anything is becoming so much more important. Like, in terms of my tools and skills, like I have a very much a predisposition to jump in, you know, and I'm learning that sometimes it's better to just like silence and listen and just nod your head in acknowledgement. And like that's the hardest thing for me to do. It's like I want to share everything I learned and everything, all my skill sets, and
But then it's like we're
yeah,
just saying everything we know, right? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and maybe, one of the things I teach teachers is you're not there to help your student, learn your next step. You're there to
Oh,
help them learn their next step, and so we get
ooh,
ahead of ourselves because we want to say everything we know and say everything we've learned, and it's just overwhelming to the person, and it doesn't even have anything to do with them, really,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah. That which brings me all the way back to, like, how, is your help helping? And like, and sometimes it does seems like we're screaming or shouting into the void, with what we do. But
But can we stand the dissonance of the empty space?
Mm,
Because a lot of times when there's nothing to do,
mhm.
it just means that there's nothing to do right now. Doesn't mean
Yeah,
there's never anything to do. It's just not right now. And can we have the discipline to wait and hold until the
yeah,
timing is? And then that right person stands up and says, the word or the phrase or writes the song or says, the speech or whatever it is that inspires the world, because the whole world is waiting for those words, right? And it might be
mhm.
you that says them, right? But so much of it is waiting for the right timing to so that it can actually be effective in some way, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just more din, more part of the cacophony of sound of everyone saying everything all at once.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. Well, we've kind of covered a lot of sprawling, kind of different things, and I really love that because I feel like there's a lot of topics in here too that I think I'd like to pick up on, maybe expand on, yeah, which would be amazing. But we really are being called. There's a lot of different kind of layers of the world. I like to think about even like the seven rays. I think there's like layers to the internet. There's layers to everything, and there's a lot of convergence happening. Whether it's 2025 astrological, and we are going to be called on in our lives, from moment to moment, to sort of either expend this energy or not expend it. Say something or don't say something. And in a lot of cases, I feel like we're going to be in situations like, is there a call to action? And like, I just like, maybe we could just take a moment to, how do we graciously, with integrity, without compromising your principles, like, how do you navigate um, this current moment? Um,
Yeah, be present.
mhm.
The answer is in the
Always.
moment,
Yeah.
and our point of power is in the moment. And if we're
Hmm.
not in the moment, we're not much good for anything. And
Yeah.
when we're in an opinion, that's the past, right? Something I already think, and I'm
Mhm.
going to apply
Okay.
onto everything I can think of. I'm going to try to make that dogma be part of my answer because it's the thing I know, and I'm going to keep repeating it and hammer that nail into every single thing I can find,
Hmm.
right? But presence is creative,
Yeah.
and it responds in the moment to the moment rather than some preconceived point of view or fixed answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. It's like, we're just, we're bringing up the past with these ideas if we're not open to what's happening in this moment. Yeah.
And it's very humbling because when you really are present to anything,
Hmm.
to the sunset or to a person in a conversation, it's very humble. There's not
Yeah.
oh, I think this and I want to tell you, or here's the three things and the three steps to how to help.
Yes.
It's so bigger than that. And yet it's simple. So it's
Yeah.
huge, of course, and
Hmm.
vast and unexpressible and ineffable.
Hmm.
And it's simple. Be present. And in that
Yeah.
presence, and meditation teaches that every time we meditate, it's to be present here and now, here and now, here and now, as I
Yeah.
am. Right. And you stand there in that space of presence, and then we become angels in a sense, and when we're holding like that. But
Hmm.
most of the time we're reacting
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. It
Do
keeps coming
people
back.
like me? Do
Yeah.
I look right? I didn't wear the right outfit. Just
Hmm.
all that stuff. We're just judge, 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 and being judged and judging back and judging judgers. And
Yeah. It's turtles all the way down with judging. Um, yeah, because we've produced, I think, two meditation classes for you here, and I was thinking back to just how much of that is about just being present in the moment, and like how um, it's when you're cultivating that being present in the moment in the meditation, it prepares you for when you're in the moment when you're being called to help. It's like, and in the same ways that like you don't go on stage and perform having never practiced your scales. This is where we start to practice. So
you got to
it all it,
practice.
it all comes back to
Yeah.
meditation. This is where we start being in that moment. How do you do it? Well, you meditate in the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
everything is a meditation.
Yeah.
And you think of those ones, the certain lamas and teachers that are living up in the mountains and they never come down and they live in a cave and they're doing this service, right? Talk about planetary service, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're holding a space that they never get any accolade for, or people don't even know who they are. And maybe they don't even know who they are anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're just holding for the greater good of all. And that's a kind of a way of practicing that presence to the allness of kind of every being, that all blessings to all beings. They're holding like that. But in our regular life, we're on the front line down here duking it out, right? And so anytime we are in with our dukes up, in a sense, we are in the battle. And when we're in battles like that, we're in some sort of reactive state. Right. And I'm not saying we can't, you shouldn't do that. We can't help it. We're constantly doing that, but we're still, think of the line of my side, your side, and the triangle of the line that goes up. You're always reaching for higher ground as best as we are able to, as best as we can allow for it. And that takes huge discipline because it's so much easier to react.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And try to fix it.
Yeah.
For somebody else.
Yeah.
Our way, though, which has maybe nothing to do with that person.
Right.
How much of that is ego? You just got to wonder, So, it's a tricky business.
It is a tricky business.
It's a big conversation, and there's more about this, really. But it gives us a starting place, I guess, to talk about it from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is help?
I really do. I think about that, not to go off on a total different tangent here. But I often think about, especially like the idea of a cloistered monk or another, like what, that question kind of lingers: are they copping out? Are they?
No,
and they're not. They're not really. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very high thing. A nun, a priest, a lama. Those are high positions of intentional praying, intentional holding for the world. It's not. It's just a different calling, though. Yeah. And another person's calling might be to sing it on a stage. And that's not less or more. It's just their way, right? Everyone has to do it and find their way. And the way that when we're the most connected to our own essence and we express from essence, it's always right. It's when we try to be somebody else's or, try to be not ourself. That's when the distortion happens. And whatever we're trying to communicate is less impacting because it's been not contaminated, but like diffused, Yeah. Because it's not pure. Because you always wanted to connect to the soul, which is pure. The soul is pure. And I don't mean that in a good, bad way. I just mean in its value. It's a pureness of consciousness that isn't confused about itself. We're confused about ourselves.
Yeah. I'm confused about that's
the ego.
Yeah.
That's the ego. It defines, it says this is the right thing. And if you were like this, then you'd be a better person. And it has all these rules, right? But they're arbitrary because depending on the culture, depending on the family, the rules are all different. Yeah. If you live in the ghetto and you sell drugs, you're smart, you're making money. It's right. And it's not a bad solution given the circumstance, right? But I mean, it might end up not being the greatest, but who knows? It's really a judgment call in terms of like, is that a successful thing to do? It might get them into a place they would never have been able to if they had, just made other choices. And so we're saying, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't be that. But it's a creative solution to a condition, right? Sure. They're in a condition, or not they, we are in a condition. And then we can have a creative solution to that, or we can be held like prisoner to the beliefs of our family or the culture or the religion that we grew up in. And it gets very, very black and white. Yeah. Which is what is happening. We're in black and whiteness. So that's where that top point of the triangle becomes critical to keep remembering that there's a sort of a light, that you're the North Star of all of this. What is the karma of the United States working through Civil War karma? big time right now, North and the South, and the brother against brother, just like the American Revolution when it was English person against English person, but in another country.
Yeah.
It's still this war of Cain and Abel,
Yeah. It kind of really does come back to Cain and Abel all the time, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the polarity.
Yeah, we're still, and it's the alchemical polarity, the yin and the yang, oh, wow. All right. Well, thank you for that. That was a great episode and a great conversation, and I really appreciate it. And
thank you, Joey.
And we'll do this again.
We always have good talks.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Very dynamic.
That's right. That's right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Joey.
All right.